Welcome to our channel, all friends. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe my channel and press the bell icon to stay update for new videos. Thanks. Let's start new video. My red bangles lay scattered across the bed. The bed sheet was on the floor, and the flowers that had adorned the wedding bed were scattered throughout the room. The entire scene in the room was strange, and I stood trembling against the wall. Blood was oozing from several places on my hands because the broken bangles had pierced my skin. My wedding dress, still on my body, was torn in many places, and I was shivering badly. My 80-year-old husband saw my condition and gently said, "This is just the beginning. Why are you so worried? Come here." As he slowly approached me, my senses completely abandoned me. I quickly shook my head in denial and wrapped my arms around my chest. I couldn't bear anything more, so I immediately pleaded, "Let me go back. I don't want to stay here anymore." Hearing me, he was surprised and said, "That's not possible. I married you and gave you 40 lakh rupees. That's not a small amount. I have to make you pregnant within a month, no matter what. Come on, clean the bed and come." He came closer, grabbed my arm, and started pushing me back onto the bed, and I was trembling with fear. "Please don't do this. I'm very scared." I had practically clasped my hands in front of him. After what had just happened, I couldn't endure anymore. "Nooreen, have you forgotten? I gave you 40 lakh rupees. This time he roared harshly, and I started crying. I had made this deal out of extreme helplessness. I married an 80-year-old man for 40 lakh rupees because I thought this old man would be useless, and I would spend a month peacefully with him. I was sure he wouldn't be able to impregnate me, and he himself would divorce me according to his condition. But it was beyond my wildest imagination that on the first night and within the first hour of marriage, I would have to endure all this because of this old man. He forcibly made me make the bed again. Then, picking up a flower, he placed it behind my ear and came close to me. A strong perfume scent emanated from him, and I held my breath. I was a 25-year-old, young and beautiful girl who at that moment was so terrified because of an 80-year-old man that I was about to faint. And then, as that old man separated my torn wedding dress from my body, I screamed because the very next moment, with full force, "My name is Nooreen. I married Farzan, my aunt's son, at the age of 18 by choice. My aunt and we lived in the same house, so I fell in love with Farzan. He also loved me. When I turned 18, many proposals started coming for me, and at that time, Farzan talked to his mother about wanting to marry me. But my aunt flat out refused, saying, "His mother never let me live in peace my whole life. Now I can't choose her daughter as my daughter-in-law and put my life in trouble." Hearing my aunt's words, I started crying, and Farzan also became distraught. It was true that my mother and aunt never got along, but we hadn't thought that because of this, my aunt would refuse to make me her daughter-in-law. Moreover, my own mother also clearly said that she would never give her daughter to her sister-in-law. She has played the role of a witch all her life. Now she will only bring trouble for me as my daughter's mother-in-law. Both of them created their own fronts and made my and Farzan's life difficult. Farzan tried hard to persuade his mother somehow. The matter also reached my uncle, but neither he nor my aunt agreed. Here, my mother had also agreed to finalize my engagement with my maternal aunt's son. I cried a lot and created a scene, but it had no effect on my parents. And besides, until my aunt agreed to the relationship, my crying was useless, and my aunt wouldn't budge. The result of all this was that one night, Farzan quietly came into my room. He took my hand and said, "Nooreen, if you want to marry me, then you'll have to do what I say." Hearing him, I was surprised and said, "I'm already very upset. Don't speak in riddles now." Farzan sat down beside me and said, "Let's elope and get married. One day they will accept our marriage." Hearing his words, the ground slipped from under my feet. Even though I loved him immensely, eloping like this was impossible for me. I flatly refused him. Hearing my refusal, he stood up and said, "Okay then, forget our love and don't talk to me anymore. For your sake, I'm ready to leave home, but you're not supporting me." Hearing Farzan, I tried to make him understand and said that this wasn't right, but he said there was no other way. And then he left me. After he left, I remained deep in thought. The next morning, when I saw my mother and father, my heart couldn't accept it. I absolutely did not want to abandon them and take such a clandestine path. But that evening when my aunt came home and put a ring named Zamir on my finger, my heart wept tears of blood. I couldn't imagine anyone but Farzan. And he also came to know about my so-called engagement. He was also extremely angry. I could clearly hear sounds of him throwing things and shouting from the upstairs portion, but all his commotion was in vain because my aunt didn't even flinch. And then that night I messaged Farzan and told him I was completely ready and to arrange our departure from home. He was happy to hear this, and 2 hours later, at 3 in the morning, we quietly left the house. He had talked to one of his friends, and he took me to his friend's house. His friend had an old, sick mother. We told them everything. At first, they refused to let us stay in their house, fearing they might get into trouble, but then Farzan pleaded with them a lot, and they agreed. The next morning, we both went to court and got married. And then in the afternoon, when we returned home with the marriage papers, there was chaos in the house. My aunt was swearing at my mother, and my mother was swearing at my aunt. An endless war was going on between them, and my father and uncle were also fighting each other. Seeing us, their quarrel stopped for a moment. Then my mother said, "Tell your aunt that her son forcibly took you. Tell her, she says I haven't raised my daughter properly, and you ran away with her son, as if this Farzan is very innocent. Tell me, where did you go with him, and where did he take you?" My mother was bombarding me with questions. On the other hand, my aunt immediately went to Farzan and said, "Speak, son. Has this girl cast a spell on you? She must have taken you somewhere. It's good you've come back. Now we will leave this house. I've told your father to sell this house, and whatever money we get, we'll put it into a new house. We don't have to live in one house anymore." My aunt seized the opportunity and brought up the topic of selling the house, as she had been wanting to do that for a long time. We both remained silent for a while, and then when Farzan showed them our marriage certificate, they were stunned. Neither my siblings nor Farzan's sisters could believe it. Farzan's older brother even slapped him hard because they also didn't like us much. He had a very good job, had made some money, so he had become arrogant. And so, both Farzan and I were humiliated by our elders and thrown out of the house. Our elders showed no mercy and expelled us. Farzan didn't have a good job. He was new at a small company, and I knew nothing. My mother had put me into housework after I passed 10th grade. Now we had no place to live and no money to spend. In the beginning, when the fever of love was high, everything felt like a fantasy. We'd do everything together, everything would be fun, etc., etc. But then, with so little money, we could barely pay the house rent and nothing more. 4 to 6 months passed like this. We tried many times to go back home and persuade our families, but now it was difficult even to step foot there. My aunt had sold the house. Because of our marriage, at least this wish of hers was fulfilled. My aunt had taken a separate house, and my parents had moved into a rented one. When I went to my parents, they put all the blame on me, and when we went to my aunt's, she didn't even like to look at me. That's why we vowed never to go to them again, and were trying to move forward in life. But as time passed, love diminished, and expenses kept increasing. And then, when a year passed, I told Farzan I wanted a child. Hearing this, he lost his temper completely, saying, "Are you in your right mind? We can't even cover our expenses. What will we do with a child?" I angrily said, "If you keep earning this much your whole life, will we remain childless our whole lives? Why don't you get a good, decent job?" Hearing me, he angrily said, "If I had a degree, I would get a good job, but I didn't study because of your love." He blamed everything on me, and I looked at him in surprise. He didn't want a child, nor was he getting a good job. Our basic needs weren't being met. Desires were a distant dream. And when life runs on such a path, then love also doesn't remain. Daily quarrels started between us. Frustrated, I also took a job as a telephone operator in a small company, and there I met my 80-year-old elderly boss. My boss was smitten by my beauty and started hovering around me, which I found very inappropriate. Then, after a few days, I decided to quit the job because my boss's coming close to me and touching me on various pretexts was very distasteful to me. So I decided to quit the job and told my husband, Farzan, everything. Hearing me, Farzan became thoughtful and said, "It's been 2 years since our marriage, and in these 2 years, neither of us has achieved anything. If that old man wants to have an affair with you, then have an affair with him and accumulate wealth from him. I have absolutely no objection. Such old men are very flirtatious and easily squander their money. At least because of your old boss, our situation will change. Hearing Farzan, my anger reached the sky. I grabbed him by the collar and said, "You are shameless. Aren't you ashamed? You're telling your own wife to marry someone else." My anger was incredibly intense. I hadn't even imagined that Farzan would say such a cheap thing. I thought he would get angry upon hearing this and say that I didn't need to go to work anymore. But he advised me to trap my old boss. That's why I couldn't control my anger. When Farzan saw that I was completely furious, he grabbed me and sat me beside him and said, "There's no need to be emotional. We've already made a wrong decision out of emotion. Now you also know how much love is left between us. There are no basic necessities in the house. How can romance even be thought of? If a few more days pass in such poverty, we will both start hating each other's wives. That's why I'm thinking, why don't you pretend to love this old man, acquire some wealth, then I'll start a business with it, and we'll live a good life." Farzan finished his words, and I was just looking at him in a state of surprise and shock. I was doubting his mental state. Then I remembered my mother's words that Farzan was useless, had no sense and no etiquette. Such boys only have affairs. They don't know how to build a proper home. And for some reason, now I felt that my mother was right about Farzan. But at that time, my eyes were blinded by love, so I didn't understand anything my mother said. Otherwise, my mother had tried many times to explain to me that Farzan was not a man who could build a home. I just kept looking at his face, remembering my mother's words, and he was telling me his entire plan. He said that the 80-year-old man couldn't do anything wrong to me. Farzan said that I shouldn't marry him, just pass time with him. That would also get me a good amount of money. I flatly refused Farzan and spoke very harshly to him, but it had no result. Instead, he stopped talking to me. He said that I was getting an opportunity to change his and my destiny, but I was unnecessarily prolonging the matter. He was trying to explain the same thing to me in countless ways, and then, at Farzan's persistent urging, I reluctantly began to pay attention to my old boss. Although my heart was not willing to do all this, I still loved Farzan with all my heart, but I took this step only out of love for him. Then my boss proposed marriage to me, and in a panic I said, "I can't marry you, I want a child." Well, I blurted out whatever came to my mind without thinking. At this, my 80-year-old boss looked at me from head to toe and said, "I bet I will make you pregnant within a month, and if I can't, I will divorce you. I won't make you crave for a child like your first husband." My boss knew I was a married woman and had no children, which is why he said such a thing, and I just kept looking at him. I couldn't even reply. An affair was fine, but my boss was now forcing me to marry him. I came home and told Farzan everything, and angrily said that I was quitting the job. That old man has lost his mind, his feet are in the grave, and he's thinking of marriage. Seeing me so angry, Farzan laughed heartily and said, "How can an 80-year-old man make you pregnant, and that too within a month? It's been 2 years since our marriage, and you haven't conceived yet." He had trapped himself by saying such a thing. Think about it. If you marry him and don't get pregnant, he himself will have to divorce you. I looked at Farzan uncomprehendingly, wondering what he was trying to say. Then Farzan completed his point. He said, "Okay, marry him, but marry him for a good amount of money. And then when he divorces you, come back to me." Hearing Farzan, I couldn't believe it was the same Farzan who had married me out of love. This was a different Farzan, completely changed by time and circumstances, who had become very distant from me. My heart automatically felt bad towards Farzan, and I thought, okay, if that's how it is, then so be it. The next day, I told my boss that I needed 40 lakh rupees as security, and the dower would be separate. I demanded such a large sum because I thought I would buy a small house for 20 lakh rupees, and with the remaining 20 lakh, Farzan would start a business. Hearing me, he immediately agreed, made me a check for 40 lakh rupees, and told me to get a divorce from my husband that very evening, and then, after completing the IDAT waiting period, marry him. He officially wanted to take me into his marriage and to his house. I told Farzan everything and gave him the 40 lakh rupee check, and his eyes popped out. He said, "I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you." Saying this, he freed me from our relationship in a moment. He said, "Now you complete your IDAT in this house, and I will start a business with this money and also buy a new house. After Idat, you marry him and go with him. When you return in a month, I will have settled down." Farzan had planned his entire future, and I just kept listening silently. A silence had descended inside my heart. I had never thought that Farzan could divorce me like that, standing there. According to him, I kept doing everything. When the Idat was complete, I left with my 80-year-old boss and reached his in-laws' house. I thought he was an 80-year-old man who could neither harm me nor would there be anyone around him whose presence would bother me, because my boss had never told me that anyone else lived in his house. He always said, "I am very lonely, I feel very isolated," etc., etc. I had asked him several times about his wife and children, but he always changed the subject. That's why I thought he had no one around him. But when I arrived at my boss's house after marriage, I was surprised to see that he also had 4 children who had wives and children of their own. They were extremely angry to see me, but my elderly husband handled them and sent me to the room through a maid. I was sitting in my room, extremely anxious, waiting for my elderly husband. But before that, my husband's middle-aged son, who was probably a father himself, stormed into my room and trashed the entire room. He also snatched the gold jewelry from my neck, pulling it so mercilessly that it left wounds on my neck. My husband's daughters-in-law also came into the room. They also treated me very badly, beating me so much that my clothes were torn. And then, after they left, I stood in a corner, trembling and crying, because they had threatened me that if I didn't leave that house immediately, they would make my life miserable. A little later, my husband came into the room and seeing me said, "This is just the beginning. Why are you scared? They will trouble you even more, but you have to stay here with me. Come on, come." Saying this, my husband laid me on the bed in that scattered room and came close to me. Feeling his breath, my life started to leave me. I had thought he was an 80-year-old man, and I wouldn't suffer any discomfort from him, but seeing his family's behavior, I was extremely terrified. Before he could do anything with me, the door started banging loudly. He muttered curses under his breath, got up, went to a door and opened the room door, and a middle-aged woman entered the room. Seeing me, she angrily said to the old man, "Baba, what is this? You got married at this age. If your son-in-law finds out, he will divorce me. Why did you do all this?" My elderly husband said, "You all got busy in your own lives. That's why I got married, because now I want to be happy. Since your mother passed away, I have become completely alone. None of you care about me. Everyone is only concerned with my wealth. My wealth is yours. I brought her for myself. Go and tell this to your brothers too." My husband strictly explained to his daughter and sent her out of the room, and then came back to me, and then he exercised his marital rights. My heart wept a lot as I surrendered myself to him, but he turned out to be much stronger than I had expected. However, one thing was very good. He took great care of me. I spent a month with him very well because I knew I wouldn't get pregnant. But there were 2 days left for the month to be complete when I felt unwell and found out I was pregnant. That old man was very happy, and I was stunned. I told Farzan about it over the phone, and he also couldn't believe it. And then I told him that I had already given him 40 lakh rupees, so he should set up his business and house and move on in his life because now I wanted to stay with my elderly husband. Hearing me, he was stunned, but I refused to come back because in that 1 month I had come to know how much loneliness there was in my elderly husband's life. His wife had died, and he was alone despite having children because his children were busy in their own lives. My husband truly loved me, and he was fulfilling that love. And now I was going to be the mother of his child. How could I leave him? That's why I ended my relationship with Farzan forever. Anyway, Farzan himself had pushed me to this point where I started thinking whether he even loved me or not. Farzan remained silent. Perhaps our love had been buried somewhere by poverty. Today, I live with my 82-year-old elderly husband. He takes great care of me. We both have a very lovely son. My husband somehow managed to control his children. Now his children don't say anything to me, especially since my son was born. They also treat me with respect. I don't know how long this mismatched relationship will last, but I do know that those who go against their parents, who don't listen to the decisions of their elders, who get emotional in the love of youth and adolescence, always suffer loss. I also left my parents, cut ties with my siblings, and then Farzan's love also died. Neither he nor his love remained, but I am certainly ruined. That's why I would like to say to everyone, always think 1,000 times before forming any relationship.